Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Good morning and or afternoon, whatever time you're listening to this. But yeah, this is Collapse Talk with Gabriel Marrero, and I'm glad to have you all back. It's been a long while since I've recorded last, so I understand I'm a bit behind, but I had some things to catch up on, and I also did a bachelor party trip to New Orleans. So I wanted to record after the trip, right off of the high, because there's some really good vibes out there. I mean, that was a really fun trip, and kind of wish we stayed longer. Actually, it was really fun. Like I want to go back, but I'm gonna fly because that's not the Louisiana ain't the type of place you want to do a road trip. I mean, you still go on I-10 and people are still swerving, but no, it's a good town. Really like it, especially because I'm from the Virgin Islands. I grew up there, and I'm also Dominican, so I've visited Santo Domingo so many different times, and like I'm driving through New Orleans, I'm like, wow, this is like the streets, the architecture, exactly the same. I mean, they were a Spanish colony at some point, so yeah, that was really fun to go and to see New Orleans, and just we did bike tours and went down Bourbon Street. And for those who do want to go back, or who haven't visited before, there's Bourbon Street, which is fun, but that's where everybody goes. Our tour guide, he suggested to us to go to Frenchman Street. That was little. It was a little more low key, and it was still packed, but it wasn't like Bourbon Street packed. Like, so it was fun. Like those venues, those parlors. Yeah, you just go to any spot, and it's like amazing music. Yeah, so lots of fun there. Of course, I'm recording now, so nothing too wild happened. So yeah, fun, lots of fun. So I'm gonna, I kind of want to do a solo trip, to be honest, but yeah, I'm gonna have to plan that out. But anyway, so I wanted to just talk about that, and I also want to address the last episode, because I kind of opened up and I was like not in a good place. Just some like tech issues with work and stuff like that, and it was just like it was just adding up. But I got that sorted out, so I don't want to get people worried about what I'm up to. And I know I talk a lot about my personal life. I get really, I kind of, I mean, it's pretty obvious that like my life isn't going so well. This is a real struggle, but this is, like I said, this is like a vlog, so I'm just gonna talk about what's going on with my life, trying to pick myself up. I've had good developments too. I mean, like, this job is going pretty well. We're still like in training, but it's a good break for once to get a steady paycheck. It's just that, you get paid, and then like I'm so behind on like so much that like, like car repairs, like it just goes down the drain. And like I just did this bachelor trip, and I'm like debating, like, do I go to this bachelor trip and basically like waste my paycheck in a weekend, or not? But I said, you know what, fuck it, because this is probably like the only real occasion that I'm going to be able to go there unless I do another trip. So I just went, and I'm glad I went, but there was a sacrifice to be made, which was my paycheck. But whatever, gotta make memories, and gotta check that area out, because yeah, man, good music, good food, lots of beautiful women. Like, that's the spot, Yeah, so that's just what I've been up to. And of course, there's like midterms and like homework. And so this next couple of weeks, maybe a month or so, like after Thanksgiving, I'm probably going to still be pretty busy. Try to record, and I definitely need to get a video essay out soon. Like, I want to do monthly releases for that kind of content, but it's gonna, just depend on like what I can fit in. So yeah, I want to stay consistent, but I have work and I have school, then I have this, which is kind of like another job. But hey, I got to keep myself busy because I'm pretty cooped up out here. So anyway, yeah, but a lot has happened. So I just wanted to let things accumulate, and a lot has happened. And so we're going to talk about that. And with our episodes, we usually talk about all sorts of issues, right? I talk about domestic issues. I talk about international geopolitics. and talk about just natural weather events, natural disasters. So, yeah, but we had a hurricane, a pretty devastating hurricane that hit Florida, and they're all along the Fort Myer, Tampa Bay area, and yeah, they've been pretty devastated, and we're still deep in the hurricane season, so it's just stuff to keep an eye out for. But this storm already has, it's not the deadliest storm for Florida. The deadliest storm, I believe, was like in the 30s. I already forgot the name, but yeah, that was a devastating storm. But this is still pretty bad, and they're still recovering, and they're still finding bodies. So, I mean, there's still a lot of missing people. So, yeah, man, it's all around like a really tragic situation for these people in these areas and for the state of Florida. So, yeah, and here's the thing about Florida, right? Especially this area that got hit, because this is more like a tourist spot, retiree sort of condo villas and such. So, yeah, man, like there's money here. There's retirees. There's it's gentrified, and it just got old. It just got blew away. It just decimated, and it probably is not going to be recovered. It's just gone. I was making some predictions, and I wanted to, like, when I make predictions, especially about these kind of events, like, I don't want it to be the worst case scenario. I just make the worst case scenario and hope that it's less than that. But this was pretty bad, and even with all that happened, this still wasn't like the worst case scenario, because like the storm was like 2 miles per hour away from turning into a Category 5 storm. But they were also like initially predicting that like the storm would like sit on the coastline and just like just hit the coast. So it instead went across. It went from the west coastline across over Orlando, then went back into the Atlantic and made landfall in South Carolina. And then even as it hit South Carolina, Category 1 storm, really bad storm surge, flooding, wind damage, fallen trees, power outages. And then it's still, the remnants of the storm, it just dissipated, turned into a post-tropical cyclone or system. And then even as it's going along the East Coast, basically, turning into a nor'easter, still rainfall, coastal flooding. So like the whole eastern coast, the eastern seaboard, just got hit with this storm. Even when it was no longer a hurricane, it still produced rainfall. And so that's, what's going to happen now, especially as those waters continue to warm up, and also with the sea level rise, because Florida is a very low-lying area. Like I read somewhere, it's like a glorified sandbar. It's really what it is. Yeah. So we get like, I think I read in the Tampa Bay area since like the 40s, like the sea level has risen almost 8 inches. So imagine if that goes like another foot within another decade or 2 decades from now. So yeah, man, Florida is not the place to be. I got family out there, and it's like you don't want to tell them to leave, to start thinking about moving, but because when you tell people in these like climate like areas, I was just talking about New Orleans, and even when I was like in New Orleans, I'm like, I can like settle down here. Like I like the vibe, and like it's a like, there's like that Caribbean culture. That's what I'm used to, and I'm like, okay. But again, like I started thinking, oh wait, this place is gonna get devastated eventually. Like we're gonna get a worse storm than Katrina eventually, but. Yeah, people living in these areas, this is home for them. You can't tell them to leave because they're like, no, this is home, but then they're gonna have to face the reality regardless. Like these people in Florida, these people out there, they were given mandatory evacuation orders like pretty early on, and some people just decided to stay because they thought that they were used to storms, right? There was a Hurricane Charlie in 2004, and they like did comparisons, and like the Charlie is so small compared to Ian. So again, like these categories, it's all wind speed. doesn't take into account the actual size of the storm. Doesn't take into account the waterfall, the rainfall. Yeah, it's just the wind speed. So you could still have, like, that storm could have still been like category 2, and it still could have caused some severe damage, with the storm surge and the rainfall. And yeah, I mean, there's still roads flooded out. I mean, it's the whole state is just a swamp. It's a marsh. Yeah, man, people's homes have just turned into a swamp overnight. Like, I saw this tweet, from this like liberal, and they were showing like, a group of evacuees in the water, like shin deep, knee deep water, and when the point man, and I use that term literally because they had the point man was the gun, he had a shotgun. They were saying, oh, well, what are they gonna do? Shoot the water or something? And it's just like, bro, like, Florida is they got some critters, man. Like, it's, yeah, man. Like, I would not fault them for having a shotgun, trying to get through that water. So, yeah, as it is now, what I've read is that there's about over 100 dead, at least 120 dead, and that's going to continue to rise. I mean, like, the whole area is just devastated, and yeah. And I also read some reports that, like, this detention center, a juvenile detention center, they weren't evacuated. So I'm waiting to hear on that, like, if, like, people survived in there. Like, it's just crazy. Whenever you read death tolls from situations like this, like, that's the official count. But there's always going to be a little bit more. And a lot of the times, state officials, especially Florida, right? They're going to downplay the death toll amount because, you don't want it too high because then it makes the state look bad. So they just, yeah, it's a lot of people have died, sadly. Like, I just watched the New Orleans Spike Lee documentary for Hurricane Katrina, when the levees broke, and that was a good documentary. That was definitely, because you're reading eyewitness accounts and people surviving through it. Yeah, man, that was an ordeal, right? And yeah, even our tour guide, when we were talking to him, he was talking about Katrina and also just like the years afterward. Like, the city was basically just a war zone. Like, yeah, it's yeah, it's so interesting just to listen to people and talk about Katrina, even though like it's gone, and it's like Katrina's kind of like the elephant in the room because, like, it's the first thing that you think about with New Orleans, and you kind of want to know what people lived through, but at the same time, like, it was a very traumatic experience, so you don't want to trivialize it. So but hey, I lived through Hurricane Harvey, and I was directly devastated by that. So, like, I can totally get what these people had lived through. Yeah, but man, hurricanes, man, they're just nasty. They're just nasty. So, I'm just gonna read real quick from CNN about just the recovery efforts. This one's a little older, but it still holds up in the sense that it's an active recovery for these towns, and as I said, it's not going to recover. It's just not. This is billions of dollars, okay? And there's going to be a certain point where these insurance companies, I mean, they did that with Andrew, right? They're just saying, fuck this, like, this is too much. So, yeah, man, like, these companies, because, I mean, a lot of these areas are gentrified, like, they're just going to be like, why are we going to rebuild this if, like, they could get hit again, like this, like, in, like, November. They could get hit by another storm. Like, that's how bad these hurricane seasons are. And, dude, like, we're talking how bad this situation is, in the Tampa Bay area, Fort Myers area. Like, we're talking how bad this is, but, dude, like, we are so lucky that this did not hit Miami, because, like, yeah, that would have been devastating. That would have been, and I got family out there, so that would have been a very worrying situation. But, dude, like, places like Sanibel, right? Pine Island, I think, yeah, that's what they're called. It's just like, it's just a wasteland. And like they had like this one little road that just got washed away. Like the coastline has been changed. Like this is going to take billions of dollars to repair, and then you're going to do repairs, and then next month or next year you're going to get the same storm. It's going to just hit again and then wash everything out. It's just like, what's the point? You know, you don't want to tell, like, if you tell people like, hey, this is kind of a lost cause, you're a bit of an asshole. But it's just like Mother Nature's literally telling you, leave. And there's just going to be a point where you have no choice. You have no choice but to leave, especially with the sea level rise. So, anyway, I'm just going to talk about with CNN and what they're saying here. So, quote, the number of people killed in Florida by Hurricane Ian rose to at least 100 on Monday, days after the storm made landfall at Category 4 strength, decimating coastal towns and leaving rescue crews searching for survivors while communities faced the daunting task of rebuilding. At least 54 people died in Lee County alone, Sheriff Carmine Marceno said Monday, up from the county's previously announced death toll of 42. The officials there are facing questions about whether evacuation orders should have been issued earlier. 24 deaths were recorded in Charlotte County, up from 12. Hurricane Ian also contributed to the death of 8 people in Collier County, 5 at Volusia County, 3 in Sarasota County, 2 in Manatee County, and 1 in each Polk, Lake, and Hendry, and Hillsborough County, officials said. 4 of the people died in storm-related incidents as Ian churned into North Carolina. More than 1,600 people have been rescued from Hurricane Ian's path in parts of southwest and central Florida since last week, Governor Ron DeSantis' office said Monday. Now, as skies turn blue, Floridians who took shelter while Hurricane Ian raged have emerged, many of them still without power or clean drinking water, to find their communities unrecognizable. At least 600,000 homes, businesses, and other customers in Florida still do not have power as of early Monday afternoon, according to PowerOutage.us. And of course, now they've restored power to most of it, but again, like I believe like Lee County was like ground zero for the landfall, and yeah, that's like again, it's just a wasteland. Many without clean tap water, with well over 100 boil water advisories in place around the state, according to Florida Health Department data. So, yeah, there's just devastation, and people out there they're like, okay, well, we've been through that storm, we can handle it, and this is just unlike anything that had happened. So, again, as I said, there's like a lot of elderly people, there's a lot of disabled people there. It's one thing when you got locals that were born there, you're just like a fisherman or whatever, it's home, you don't exactly got the money to just pick up and leave, but at the same time, like, a lot of people were just stubborn and just wanted to stay because, we've been through this before, and they're like in an area that's like 12 to 15 feet of storm surge. It's like you can't survive that. So, yeah. And not only that, too, you could survive the storm, but the infrastructure is just broken down. Like, there's nothing. You can't get water, there's no power, and you can't get on the roads now. The roads are just, like, literally washed out. So, now you're stuck, and now you gotta flag down a helicopter, and, yeah, it's... And again, this is not like a wagging the finger kind of moment, because, like, this is not what people need to hear, and many people have different reasons for staying. But those that had the resources to leave should have left, And again, like they got Ron DeSantis here, and again, whenever these natural disasters hit, especially in like red states, it's always like a PR moment, right? They get more approval, those governors. So, Ron DeSantis. I'm like, yeah, because they did issue an evacuation order pretty early. It's just, I'm guessing because he's like one of these state rights kind of guy, independent sort of people. Like, he doesn't want to completely mobilize the National Guard to get people, Like, he should have like at least put some resources out to say, if you want to leave, here's a line to contact, and then we'll come and get you. Like, like that sort of stuff. But again, there were a lot of people who were stubborn and wanted to stay. So, it's like you should at least reiterate, like, if you're going to stay, and if you do manage to survive the storm, there's not much of a guarantee that you're going to survive the aftermath, because now you're not going to have clean water, now you're not going to have power, now you're not going to be able to get on the roads. It turns into a logistical, not necessarily burden, but it turns into a logistical problem when you got civilians who stay behind in a disaster zone, and you got to provide food and water for them on top of the recovery efforts. And yeah, so it's just like, again, I don't want to play armchair, general with this, but it's just, now that we're after the fact, now that we can like say, okay, here's what should have been done, here's this and here's that. But again, people out there are stubborn and they want to stay, so there's not much else you can do. And I'm also reading from Green Wire, and they're just talking how in Florida, or these areas, how there's still thousands of people that are still missing. They're saying up to 10,000 Floridians are missing right now. Of course, this was earlier, so who knows if those numbers have been updated, but it just shows like the situation that is at hand. Because right, they got those cities and those little resort areas, but there's also those remote swamp folks. They're just living on their own. I don't know. We're almost like 2 weeks out from the landfall of the storm, so I'm willing to bet there's still some flooded areas, because that water is gonna sit there. It's gonna sit there. So yeah, I'm reading from Green Wire, and you're just saying how millions of Floridians are without power, food, and water, and about 10,000 Floridians are yet to be accounted for. So it's a grid down situation, and they're just gonna have to go door to door and figure out who's there and get them assistance. So I'm going to read from DeSantis real quick. So, quote, there are over 1,000 dedicated rescue personnel who are going up and down the coastline, end quote. DeSantis, a Republican, said at a morning news conference at the Florida Emergency Operations Center in Tallahassee. And just continuing. As Ian prepared to make landfall in South Carolina on Friday, Florida officials said that the Category 4 storm that slammed their state with 150-mile-per-hour winds on Wednesday could rank as the biggest natural disaster to ever hit the state. The governor said that officials had contacted 20,000 Floridians who filled out a shelter-in-place survey indicating that they plan to remain in their homes to ride out the storm, but they have heard back from only 10,000 of those residents. So, yeah, it could be cell phone connectivity issues. So it's not to say 10,000 people died, but yeah, it's again, like, it's gonna take some time to figure out the actual toll. So all this debris, all the roads, all the bridges that got washed out, they're gonna have to build that. I think also in Sanibel Island, like, they've basically like built the causeway. So yeah, they're just doing all that. But with this grid down situation and people living on their own, they're gonna have to find a way to survive. And yeah, there's been reports of looting, really small scale looting, but still though, like, it's like what I've read is that just people like going into stores, or I've read also that like somebody had been breaking into cars and stealing batteries. So again, really small scale stuff, and it's more just like survival mode. People just like they gotta get something. But yeah, so this is from WUSF. So they're writing saying that on Pine Island there's been small reports of looting. So yeah, they got law enforcement there. They got people. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just reading from this report. Attorney General Ashley Moody took it a step further, saying she wants looters to stay in jail and not released on bond. Moody also said maintaining law and order in the aftermath of the catastrophic damage is a top priority, and that she's reached out to state attorneys with specific directives and requests to that end. Quote, "What I have told them is consider when we're in these states of emergency asking for pretrial detention, making sure that's part of your consideration. If someone is arrested or caught going into businesses or homes, that cannot be tolerated in Florida because we will have another storm. We just hit the peak hurricane season. We're not through this season. We're not through it." So, yeah, Moody said she's worried about the perception home thefts or business looting during a state of emergency could have on the public in future emergencies. Quote, "We don't want people ever moving into the future to say, well, when Ian hit, people went into homes and they robbed their homes and they burglarized, and I don't want to leave my home." We never want them to be an impediment to people getting out when we say get out. Moody also said, "We're not going to look like Chicago." Oh, okay, well, she's just being weird like that. Yeah, I mean, again, it's state attorney general, and these are all Republicans, so they're going to be like, "Oh, we're not like Katrina, we're not like New Orleans, we got rules here, But again, these are people, I'm assuming they're doing all this looting for survival needs, not because they're criminals. But hey, again, it's the rule of law. It goes out the window, and people do what they have to do. So yeah, and yeah, I mean, that's just Florida that got hit, and they got pretty devastated. But another place that got hit hard was Puerto Rico, with Hurricane Fiona. And that was a Category 1 storm. In fact, Hurricane Fiona went all the way to like Nova Scotia as a Category 3 storm. That is crazy. Really crazy. So, yeah, this hurricane season has been unprecedented. It's definitely one for the history books. I mean, it's not done yet. It's not done. So we're just going to have to see. In fact, now there's a Hurricane Julia that is in the Gulf Coast, or it hit Central America, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and they're projecting it to go over the Gulf. So it's projected to it hit. So it was going west. Now the system is over Central America. Now it's projecting to go north. So who knows if that system goes over the Gulf Coast, if that's going to pick up steam. Because again, those Gulf waters are very warm, and that could pick up the storm system. And yeah, so I mean, we're going to have to see for a week or so what the weather situation will be. But again, just going back to Hurricane Fiona and Puerto Rico that got hit. Yeah, it's a pretty bad situation. And again, like 5 years ago, they got hit with Maria, and Puerto Rico still hasn't fully recovered. And so Joe Biden, in terms of assistance and recovery, he has pledged $60 million. Now, $60 million is better than nothing, okay? But how many billions of dollars have we dropped for Ukraine so far? It's got to be over 60 billion now. And we just write them a blank check whenever. And yeah, 60 million for Puerto Rico. And then they also they did disaster declarations, but for whatever reason, they didn't do the whole island. They just chose very specific areas. The whole island has been devastated, so the whole island needs assistance. But they were saying how the parts, the counties that were left out, they're predominantly black areas or poor areas. So they're only declaring disaster in the areas that have some money. Because I mean, it's a tax haven, Puerto Rico. And we got Logan Paul out there. So yeah, they're going out there. These colonizers, that's what it is. They're trying to turn the island into Hawaii, and yeah, and that's where they're gonna declare the disaster and get the government assistance there. And again, it's only $60 million, and then there's probably gonna, because again, Puerto Rico is very corrupt, so there's gonna be people, embezzling that money. Like they had like a whole uprising and forced the governor to resign. Like the situation in Puerto Rico is not good, and it's only going to get worse. And again, this is me. I've talked pretty consistently about independence for Puerto Rico, Boricua, Boriquen, getting them their independence, because like American occupation clearly isn't doing so well for them. But of course, like, oh no, because people want to be a state. Okay, well then let them be a state. But again, it's going to be like another Hawaii. But no, they should be an entirely independent country. And yeah, of course, there's still going to be American imperialism there. But hey, 60 million in aid from President Biden, and like he said some stupid statement where he's like, "Well, I've always kind of considered myself to be a Puerto Rican." And it's just like, what are you talking about? And I also read some like unofficial reports about how people in the areas that Biden visited, like they had all these cops lined up and like telling people to stay inside, do not come out. Like, dude, like, and then yeah, this is just the press photo releases that they've been doing. It's all an act. As I said, that it's a PR thing. They have to do the PR. This is an area that got devastated, and they just gotta make appearances, But yeah, that is Puerto Rico's situation. They've been dealing with quite a bit. Let me read here. So I'm reading from Reuters. So Biden alluded to the controversy surrounding Trump's response to Hurricane Maria when it ravaged Puerto Rico in 2017, killing thousands. Some residents of the island said Trump was slow to dispatch aid in the wake of that storm. Trump objected to sending more money to Puerto Rico after the hurricane and froze billions intended for the island, a move Biden has reversed. Quote, "Yes, Puerto Rico is a strong place and Puerto Ricans are a strong people, but even so, you have had to bear so much more than needed. And you haven't gotten help in a timely way," Biden said. And then he pledged the $60 million to help rebuild coastal regions. But like, what about those? Because Puerto Rico is a very mountainous island, so like those areas up in the mountains, like they're pretty messed up too, and they're probably not going to get assistance. Yeah. So, as an unincorporated territory of the United States, Puerto Rico is neither a U.S. state nor a sovereign nation, and residents do not have voting rights unless they move to the mainland. Puerto Rican President Governor Pedro Pierluisi, speaking before Biden, said, quote, "We want to be treated in the same way as our fellow Americans in the States in times of need. All American citizens, regardless of where they live, should receive the same support from the federal government." Biden listed recent investments in Puerto Rico's roads, bridges, mangrove restorations, and coral reefs included in recent funding bills from the U.S. Congress, and said more money was coming. Quote, "I'm ready to deploy and expedite more resources from the Department of Energy and other federal agencies so that residents can get clean, reliable power," he said. So yeah, that is what happened there. And there's also controversies talking about the power situation on the island. It's like entirely privatized, and it's already been pretty inconsistent with outages and such, which I can speak from personally. I grew up in the Virgin Islands, and yeah, our power situation was just like, I remember being in class and just like our power would go out and then we just continue just like nothing. And I come to the States and there's like one power outage and people started freaking out, and I'm just like, oh, okay, just another date. Yeah. So Just also reading from Politico about Puerto Rico and just the feelings that Puerto Ricans are feeling. Because again, like, they have really no power over the situation. They're just, you're a territory, you're a colony of the United States, and you have no control of that. And it's so interesting, though. They talk about Puerto Ricans being citizens, but it's just like they only did that so they could draft up Puerto Ricans for the military. That's really the only reason they did that. So, yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I'm just reading from Politico. So as Ian batters Florida, Puerto Ricans fear being forgotten. So they're just talking about certain sentiments in the island and just what people are dealing with out there. Right. So even before Florida suffered its own devastating hurricane landfall Wednesday, community and nonprofit leaders in Puerto Rico were criticizing the Biden administration for what they call missteps in the government's response to Fiona. These include not initially covering all of Puerto Rico in President Biden's declaration of a major disaster, as well as a slow flow of federal aid to communities that experienced catastrophic flooding after receiving 20 to 32 inches of rain. That, and as I said, is a very mountainous island, so 20 to 30 inches is really bad. Right now, some in the U.S. island territory fear that the undeniable recovery needs in Florida after the state's pummeling by Category 4 Hurricane Ian will shift attention and resources away from Puerto Rico when it remains vulnerable. That won't happen, Biden said after a FEMA briefing Thursday, adding that it is his intention to go to Puerto Rico. So this article came out before his visit. So, quote, "I want to be clear to the people of Puerto Rico, we're not going away," the president said. Quote, "I am committed to you and the recovery of the island. We'll stand by you for however long it takes to get done." Power is still out for over 20% of Puerto Rican customers, unstable for those who have it, and partly due to the lack of electricity, continue to plague residents. Hospitals operating on backup generators because of unsteady power are running out of diesel, and the distress and frustration over the state of affairs on the island is weighing on residents. They also worry about the imbalance in political clout. Florida, a key presidential battleground state, with a teeming congressional delegation in some of the nation's wealthiest ZIP codes, has zip codes, I should say, has received major federal funding after previous storms. Puerto Rico, which has no electoral votes in presidential elections and no voting representation in Congress, is only now starting to see the billions in federal dollars set aside for the island after 2017's Hurricane Maria. Quote, "We're going to be put in the back burner as always," said Gina de Jesus, an organizer with New York Communities for Change, who is in Puerto Rico. Quote, "It's Florida. It's attached to the United States." The White House said Wednesday that it, quote, "remains focused on response and recovery efforts in Puerto Rico." In a fact sheet, it said 1,000 federal workers are on the ground to support power restoration, debris removal, urban search and rescue, and other response activities. More than 43% of Puerto Rican's residents live below the poverty line, a figure more than 3 times the U.S. average. This has complicated the recovery from Fiona, with basic necessities such as food, water, and hygienic supplies difficult to obtain 5 years after Maria. Things are not okay in Puerto Rico," said Monica Feliu Mohed, Director of Communications and Science Outreach for Ciencia Puerto Rico, a nonprofit that advocates for science and researchers on the island. Quote, "I think it's important that people don't forget about Puerto Rico," she said. "We need to continue having public pressure and accountability because the next 5 years are going to be critical for the recovery and reconstruction efforts." Yeah, so there's a lot to rebuild on the island, and a tight situation. You know, Puerto Rico is, as I said, it's not a battleground. I mean, it's not even, there's no votes. They get no representation. So, yeah, man. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, you're forgotten. And things are not good, and things are going to continue to fall apart. And so, I wanted to at least talk about like this juxtaposition, because I was talking earlier about like people needing to leave these climate areas and disaster areas. And it's like, when you look at Florida, you look at these areas that they've been building on, it's like, they've been building it on like mangrove like areas and coastal floodplains. So like they shouldn't have built it in the first place. It's just tourist spots and these retirement villas, and yeah, this is just completely artificial. But in Puerto Rico, that's their home. That's like literally where they live in, and that's where they're born in. I mean, Puerto Ricans are effectively the indigenous people of the island, right? Taínos. And now they're getting forced out because like the things are falling apart, and they're not getting the same level of investment, the same level of assistance as the mainland is. And again, Fiona is just like, it's just another thing that they got to deal with, and they're going to start leaving. Puerto Ricans are leaving the island, and it's going to get resettled by these fucking colonizers, by these Logan Paul dickheads. And it's just like, it's really sad. It's really sad. This is colonialism. That's what it is. And yeah, and people are just okay with it. They don't really seem to. It's like, oh, we're gonna go vacation. Yeah, whenever I hear people going to vacation in Hawaii or Puerto Rico, I'm just like, okay, well, yeah. It's just, again, people just want to party, and they just want to tour, and they don't want to think about the ethics involved of like, hey, I'm about to go to an area that's being actively exploited through colonialism. But hey, man, I just want to party, and I just want to drink my mimosa and pina coladas, and oh well. And yeah, whenever I visit places like that, I don't like going to tourist spots. I like to go where the locals are. So, that way I can, buy into local businesses and such. And I mean, hey, I'm Dominican, so it's like we're cousins basically. So, yeah, it's just, yeah. In fact, actually, so, because my name is Marrero, and like there aren't too many Dominican Marreros that I've met, but I've met a lot of Puerto Rican Marreros. So there might have been a family, like I think my father mentioned, like a family member coming from Puerto Rico. So I don't know. It's just like, when I think about our family history, it's very obscure. So there's like some stories here and there. But I mean, our islands are very interconnected culturally, family. And, yeah, even though there are times where Dominicans and Puerto Ricans butt heads, it's just like any other family, right? Yeah. But that is, I kind of opened up with some natural disaster stuff, and that's usually what I say for the end of the episode. But this was pretty serious, just back-to-back storms. And with Hurricane Julia, we could experience another storm system along the Gulf Coast in Texas. So I'm going to have to see what next week holds. I'm going to have to start filling up my water now, so that way I'm ready for whatever comes. Yeah, man. It's just the life that we're living right now. So, yeah. And moving on to the international segment, geopolitical issues, we had some pretty big elections that happened, and in Italy and in Brazil. So interesting developments there. I want to talk first about Brazil and just that situation. Of course, I'm not super in tune with it, so I don't want to pretend like I know what's happening. I'm just going to report what's being said here. But this is the first round that they did the counts for, and now they're going into the second round of voting. And so, yeah, Brazil is an interesting place. It's like, it holds a lot of weight, especially online. Like I remember I put a tweet out, because there was this right wing person like talking like, oh well, I'm going to endorse hire Bolsonaro. And then they posted like a video of like Bolsonaro saying like, oh, well, see, because we don't hate gay people and we don't hunt gay people, and just being him, Bolsonaro, because he's a fascist. He's a really bad guy. Like he's so bad. And I posted a statistic out saying like, because he said like, oh no, we don't hunt gay people, and like in 2021 there was like 300 confirmed deaths of LGBTQ people. Like Brazil is one of the deadliest places in the world for trans people. And again, like this is specifically happening under Bolsonaro's administration. If you look at the stats for LGBT murders, like it just skyrockets under his administration, and then they want to act like, oh no, but you see, because Brazil is always a violent place, and so we don't, it's just like, just no, like, yeah, I got brigaded by all these Brazilian fascists. It was pretty funny. I'm like, oh no, what have I done? I remember reading like one comment. People were like saying like, oh, well, he is a famously xenophobic podcaster. I'm like, when have I been xenophobic? This is so funny. These fucking Brazilian fascists are calling me that. Oh well, yeah. Brazilian Twitter, Brazilian internet is wild. You just make any mention of Brazil, it's like, oh, okay, like, yeah. So, reading from Reuters, just about this runoff election that's being scheduled for the 30th. So, Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro and his leftist rival, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, on Monday, buckled up for 4 more weeks of intense election campaigning after the president's unexpectedly strong showing in the first round set up a tight October 30th runoff vote. Lula, a 2-term former president who was jailed on corruption convictions that was later overturned, won the most votes in Sunday's presidential election, and for many analysts is still the favorite to win the race later this month. But Bolsonaro's better-than-expected performance revitalized his campaign, giving credence to his claim that the pollsters were wrong to write him off in Brazil's most fraught election since the end of military rule in 1985. The far-right's leader's strong showing also prolonged questions about whether Brazil's democratic institutions will withstand his unfounded allegations that the country's voting system cannot be trusted. Right. So, they, I don't know, there's worries. People are saying that Bolsonaro is going to start a coup if he doesn't get his way. Yeah, who knows what can happen? Because Brazil is very much like the United States in terms of politics, and things are very divided right now. So, and again, this Bolsonaro guy, he's talked about how the military rule, like, he laments it. He's just like, man, those were the good old days. And I'm just like, bro, it was a fucking military dictatorship. And he's just like talking like he was he was literally in the army at the time. So like, yeah, like it's so bad. Like, these people are so evil. It's so fucking crazy. Wow. And I even saw some some images that show like the United States Army like training like Brazilian special forces, and it's just like people are saying like, are they trying to say something, like, because there has been a wave of like leftist or progressive elections in South America. So if Brazil goes left wing, who knows? We could see the United States and the CIA doing coups, and that it's not out of the question. They'll do it, right? So most polling firms had given Lula a 10 to 15 point lead ahead of Sunday's vote, raising the possibility of a first round victory for the leftists. But with 99.99 of electronic votes counted, Lula has taken 48.4% of the votes versus 43.2% for Bolsonaro, meaning that neither secured the over 50% needed to avoid a runoff. And they're just talking about different candidates. So people voted for those candidates. But yeah, Lula being ahead by almost 5 points, that's a pretty strong lead. And, these other candidates, they're like, leftists or, communists, social democrats. And so all those people are Lula adjacent. I mean, they've pretty much all, like, well, I wouldn't say all, but most of them have come out in support for Lula. So, yeah, I mean, people who it's like one of those situations where, because Bolsonaro was really bad. Okay, he's very bad. So the people who like Bolsonaro are going to vote for Bolsonaro, and the people who vote for the other candidates, they're doing so because they don't like Lula and they don't like Bolsonaro. But now they're in a situation where it's like, well, it's like, yeah, because again, anybody who likes Bolsonaro is going to vote for Bolsonaro, and then people who don't like Bolsonaro, they're going to vote elsewhere. So, yeah, it's it's just like our election that we just had, and Bolsonaro who's already saying, oh, the voting system can't be trusted, and so who knows what is going to unfold. And this election is going to happen on October 30th, and we're just going to have to keep a close eye on it, because there are very real concerns of a coup and maybe even larger political violence and unrest. So that is Brazil. But we have other developments in Europe and Italy with their election, and they quite literally voted for a fascist. They got girl boss Mussolini in power. And it's so weird seeing all these like liberals coming out in support, because they just hear, oh, first Italian female president or female prime minister. Oh, well, the glass ceiling has been burst. But it's like, yeah, it's girl Hitler. It's girl Mussolini. Yeah. I mean, like, she literally, like, as a teenager, organized for the fascist party, the nationalist party, post-World War II, that was founded by the Italian fascists who worked with Mussolini. So, like, she's, yeah, like, and again, she's smarter, though, because when she talks, she doesn't come outright saying that stuff. She instead tries to appeal more to the working class, and she tries to talk with folks, and so like it's a messaging sort of thing, because the things that she says sometimes, it's like, okay, like, you're not wrong, but she's just using that populist rhetoric to whip people up, and also start saying Italy has to look out for Italy. She's a nationalist, so now she's going to be more concerned about Italy's interests instead of the EU. And yeah, man, all these different countries they're going into the right wing. They're going to become nationalist. The EU is not on good legs. It's not. It's getting weak, especially with this energy crisis that's happening. Winter is around the corner. I mean, it gets colder earlier for them. I mean, like November, October, things start to cool down. And yeah, man, like, it's going to get, this is going to be a rough winter for them. So, reading from Politico, this is actually European Politico. So, Giorgia Meloni, the far-right leader who is expected to head to the next Italian government, said that Rome will start putting national interests first in her first speech since last Sunday's election. Meloni's Brothers of Italy party led a right-wing coalition that took 44% of the vote. In the election campaign, she warned that good times are over for Europe. In her speech in Milan, Meloni addressed the energy crisis and referred to negotiations between European energy ministers on Friday. Italy is pushing for a European price cap on gas to keep costs down, while Germany rejects that idea. But Berlin announced a €200 billion aid package to help German citizens and businesses with energy prices, measures that other European countries cannot afford. Quote, Probably many of those reading today's newspapers will have understood that when we said that in Europe you start from a national interest to arrive at a shared solution, we didn't say it because we were populist, but because we are lucid, Meloni said. Quote, the attitude of Italy needs to return to defending its national interests, he said. This, quote, is something that will change in the next few months, Meloni added. Quote, this doesn't mean a negative attitude to Europe, but a positive attitude to ourselves, Meloni said. We must start from the national interests because others do it. Italian energy giant Eni said on Saturday that Russia's Gazprom would not be sending any of the gas requested for delivery on Saturday. Quote, Gazprom informed that it is not able to confirm the gas volumes requested for today, stating that it's not possible to supply gas through Austria. Eni said in a statement on its website, quote, therefore, today's Russian gas supply to Eni through the Tarvisio entry point will be at zero, it said. Earlier on Saturday, Meloni met with Silvio Berlusconi, leader of Forza Italia, and her ally in the right-wing coalition. In a joint statement, the two parties said their leaders discussed the most urgent dossier of the day, starting with the high cost of energy. So yeah, people are getting hit pretty hard with their bills, and there have been really big protests and people burning their energy bills. And yeah, this is a pretty significant development. I mean, Italy was the first fascist state during the 1920s, and there was a wave of right-wing nationalism, and that's just where things seem to be going as conditions get worse for the consumers, and then they get whipped up by this populism, and then the EU starts falling apart, and of course they have to deal with the gas, and things are getting rough. Things are getting very tight, and we're talking about gas caps and trying to, in the UK that they're looking to open up all the fracking. It's like things are just accelerating at such a pace that it's really hard to catch up. Like, you miss a week and then something big happens. So, So, as I was talking about with the energy issues that are happening, and so in the Baltic, they had this pipeline, the Nord Stream, and there was a sabotage. Somebody detonated an explosive. And so, this is just a very serious situation. And people are speculating that, the official story is that Russia did it. But it just doesn't add up because Russia spent like billions of dollars to build this thing. They control all the gas. So like, why would they want to blow up their own pipeline? They could just shut it off. It's like, this is not adding up at all. And Poland, the United States, they hated that this pipeline was built. They did not want this to happen. And so again, you're not going to see any major story talking about a possible U.S. action. Again, it's like I read somewhere where somebody on Twitter was saying like, people of color, the global South, when I look at this Nord Stream situation, like, we can believe that the United States has done this because they've done it to us. And they are going to do whatever they can to keep the United States, to keep Europe in their pocket. And so, that's just what they're dealing with. And, the U.S. is just like, they're going all the way, man. Like, it just seems like we were playing chicken with Russia, and like, we're just putting Europe right in the crossfire so that Europe gets the worst of it, and that we can find a way to make money off of it. Like, they were showing like all the different currencies that the U.S. does business with, like the euro, the pound, and like the U.S. dollar is going up while all these other currencies are going down, and it's just like, yeah, man, we're turning Europe into a vassal, right? It's like complete subjugation. So, right. So I'm reading from Reuters. So Sweden sent a diving vessel on Monday to the site of Russian gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea that ruptured last week following blasts in the area to probe an incident that has added new tensions to Europe's energy crisis. Europe is investigating what caused three pipelines in the Nord Stream network to burst in an act of suspected sabotage near Swedish and Danish waters that Moscow quickly sought to pin on the West, suggesting the United States stood to gain. Nord Stream, which runs from Russia to Germany, has been at the center of a growing gas supply crisis in Europe, which until recently relied heavily on Russian fuel, sending prices soaring. Several European states have triggered emergency plans that may lead to rationing as they race to find alternative supplies, while Britain now faces a significant risk of gas shortages this winter. The regulator said, quote, "The Coast Guard is responsible for the mission, but we are supporting them with units," a spokesperson for the Swedish Navy, Jimmy Adamson, told Reuters. Quote, "The only one we are naming is HMS Bellows, which is a submarine rescue and diving vessel." Sweden's prosecution authorities said in a press release that it had designated the area as a crime scene. A spokesman for the Swedish Coast Guard confirmed in an email that there was now an exclusion zone of 5 nautical miles around the leak. Earlier, the Swedish Coast Guard said Nord Stream 1 had stopped leaking, but an overflight suggested gas was still draining out of Nord Stream 2 and bubbling to the surface over a 32-yard radius. The Kremlin doubled down on allegations that the West was to blame for the ruptures on Monday, saying that the United States was able to increase sales and prices of its liquefied natural gas as a result, LNG. Washington has strongly denied any involvement. European countries suspect sabotage, but has declined to say who could have been behind it. Kremlin-controlled Gazprom also said flows could resume at the last remaining intact pipeline in the Nord Stream 2 network, a suggestion likely to be rebuffed given Europeans blocked Nord Stream 2 on the eve of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in February. Quote, "If a decision is made to start deliveries through Nord Stream 2's Line B, natural gas will be pumped into the pipeline after the integrity of the system has been checked and verified by supervisory authorities," Gazprom said. So, that is the Nord Stream situation, the sabotage which they're trying to place on Russia. There's rumors that it's the US that did it. So, we're gonna, have to, we're never gonna know. Honestly, we're never gonna know. But it's just, this is the time that we're living in, and it's espionage, it's sabotage, it's all this stuff that's just happening around the world. And the US at the moment is just, or I should say the US, the West, NATO, Russia, it's just really bad situation, and we are really on the precipice of like a pretty bad disaster, that nuclear war and such. So we're just in for the ride, it seems. And man, they're gonna have the doomsday clock pretty soon, and they're gonna get it closer to midnight. So these regions that Russia is claiming, they got Zaporizhia, they're claiming Kherson, they're claiming the Donbass, the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. It's they had a referendum, and so supposedly those people want to be Russians. And just coincidentally, the results are like overwhelmingly positive, like 90%. I don't doubt that people living there do want to be Russia, but come on, 90%, like, come on. But it's like, at this point, it's like, just give it to them. I don't, like, oh, you just want Russia, you want Ukraine to be just, yeah, your national sovereignty is not worth nuclear war. Okay, it's just not, patently not. And like even Zelensky, he came out saying to do a preemptive strike to prevent Russia from, to hamper their nuclear capabilities. And I'm just like, this guy literally wants World War III. Like, he wants World War III. I was, at first, when they were doing the war and covering it, he was the hero. And, I mean, he's like the poster boy, but like that, for me at least, the honeymoon phase is done. Because I was having respect for the guy, because, I mean, like, your country is at war and you're literally getting invaded by Russia. But now it's just like, now I'm being more measured about him. Now I'm just like, maybe this guy isn't all that it's about, right? I mean, anytime now where like the media is like covering like a specific figure, now I just immediately have to assume this guy is a piece of shit. So that's kind of what Zelensky and Russia's up to, and they're just trying to finish this war, and they're calling for a preemptive strike against Russia. And yeah, man, things are really bad. And like, honestly, like, I was doing this New Orleans trip, and I'm just like, we could literally just have like something escalate. And I mean, literally did. Like, there was the Crimean bridge that exploded, and they're saying that it was possibly a suicide bomber that did that. And just yesterday they had missile strikes in Kiev, and yeah, man, things are escalating. They really are. And we're going to give them more money. We're going to give them more equipment and more defense measures. And it's just like, again, the billions and billions of dollars that we have sent to Ukraine. But, Puerto Rico gets $60 million in aid. Because that's the business. War is the business. The United States just has to stick its nose where it doesn't belong, start causing issues and start causing unrest. And then once shooting starts, start stepping in with defense contractors with all their equipment that they are just sitting in warehouses. And it's just like, yeah. And then, of course, as I was covering in earlier episodes, they're having corruption issues, and people are getting those weapons and then putting it in the black market, and who knows where that's going to end up. And this is like NATO equipment. So yeah, this is not good. This is not good. We have to go to the table. But then if you talk on Twitter, like Elon Musk, he started talking, hey, maybe we should do a referendum and maybe we should cede those territories, and he just got blasted. And of course, like, it's Elon Musk, and these are all like crypto bros and libertarian types, and so like he got a lot of flack and a lot of heat for suggesting that maybe we should use some diplomacy, because nuclear war is really bad for business. Conventional war is good for business, but not a nuclear war. So it's just like, what is happening? And again, like, you make any kind of mention of we should make a deal and Ukraine should just cede those territories. They put up a strong fight, but like, what the fuck, man? And even then, though, that's the thing, because even if we did give those concessions, it's like, it's appeasement. Oh, yeah, I guess, but like, the stakes are so much higher than it was in World War II, and like, it's just like, yeah, this is so bad. This is really bad. But I'm going to read from CNBC just about this referendum and this annexation, or proposed annexation, because they don't really have full control of these so-called, now they view it as Russian territory. So they don't even, like, they haven't even gotten to Zaporizhzhia yet, like the proper city. So it's like, yeah. So anyway, so reading from CNBC. So Russian President Vladimir Putin on Friday declared 4 new regions of the country shortly after holding sham referendums in parts of occupied Ukraine. Quote, "There are 4 new regions of Russia," Putin said in a televised ceremony from the Kremlin in Moscow, according to a translation. Quote, "The results are known, well known," Putin said, referring to the series of votes that Ukraine and Western governments say breach international law. He claimed the results were due to the will of millions of people, saying they had the right to self-determination. The territory being seized more than 7 months into the Kremlin's war consists of 2 pro-Russian republics in Luhansk and Donetsk in the east, and in Kherson and Zaporizhia in the south. It is thought to make up roughly 18% of Ukraine's land, although the precise details of the boundaries were not immediately clear. Unsurprisingly, the votes seen as illegitimate by Ukraine and its allies saw a majority of people vote to join Russia. Echoing previous claims that the West is trying to undermine Russia, Putin said, quote, "The West is looking for new opportunities to hit us, and they always dreamt about breaking our state into smaller states who will be fighting against each other." Quote, "They cannot be happy with this idea that there is this large country with all these natural riches and the people who will never live under foreign oppression," he added. So this is really the heart of Putin's efforts, because what he just said there is true. The West cannot stand that Russia is independent from their influence, and that, people are talking about dividing up the territories. Not to say that there isn't like Slavic oppression of those indigenous peoples, and especially in Siberia and Central Asia, but at the same time, you're gonna break up these territories, and they're gonna start fighting each other. When before there were just one state. Man. And I mean, again, look at the Middle East, look at Africa, look at Southern Asia, Indochina, anywhere where the West goes in to liberate, the humanitarian efforts, it turns into a disaster. And that's what they want for Russia. They want a weak Russia. And it's not going to happen. They're not going to accept it. Putin won't accept it. And they started doing mobilizations and started drafting up men. And people have been leaving. They have been leaving. But it's there's gonna get a point where, even though the people might not be completely in support of the war effort, there might come a point where they realize that the West is so against them that they have no choice but to fight for their nation. It turns into a matter of survival. I mean, people are leaving Russia, and you got these liberals on TikTok, or not Twitter, saying, "Oh, these people coming here, they're a threat and they don't want to stay and make changes in their country." But it's dude, what the fuck, man? Holy shit. Yeah, man, it's just, it's when I look at our political establishment, it's both sides want a war. The Republicans want a war with China, and the liberals want a war with Russia. It's so bad. It's just and then you just sit here saying hey, let's not have a war. War is really bad. Really bad. Especially a World War III. Even if no nuclear weapons are used, the planet is going to get devastated. It's really bad. Man. There was this GoPro footage of this Ukrainian volunteer, and they basically got overrun. And it's just this guy in a trench, and there's a couple of his buddies who are dead, and he's terrified, and he's shooting, and he's fuck. And then next thing you know, he gets shot, and then that's what's gonna happen. That's what the war is about. You're gonna be in a trench line, and you're just gonna get shot, and they're just gonna take your body and throw you into a mass grave, and then that's it, and your family never finds you. It's just that's World War III right there. Yeah, even not too long ago, when I started opening up with this Ukrainian conflict, at the time, I was like, well, if we have to, if, Europe is under threat of getting overrun, then I'll do my part. But now I'm just like, nope, fuck this. Fuck this shit. Okay? Well, I'm going to go to Ukraine or Eastern Europe. I'm going to, get radiation sickness or get my limbs blown off and then come back to this country and end up like these homeless veterans. Fuck that shit. Fuck you, man. No. It's like people saying that I'm anti-American. Yeah, you're goddamn right I am. Okay? You want me to be proud of this country, then do something that makes me proud. Cause I don't respect tanks. I don't respect fighter jets or aircraft carriers or bombs and assault rifles, or I don't respect this military that we can deploy at a moment's notice and just completely wipe out a global South nation because they nationalized their mining and oil operations, right? That doesn't make me proud. What makes me proud is functioning infrastructure. What makes me proud is reliable power and clean water. What makes me proud is an education system that truly offers the best opportunities to children from all backgrounds. What makes me proud is a robust working class and a strong middle class where people actually achieving the American dream and getting homes and, offering better opportunities for their children. Like, that's the type of stuff that I respect. And if this country actually invested itself in providing the best opportunities for the American people, then I would feel proud. But that's not what's happening. You're just left to your own device. Because, you just got to pull yourself up. You just got to work, right? Man, it's so, because I talk with my mom and, we're not in the best position. We're just not. But there's only so much that I can do. There's only so much that my sisters can do. And it's like, we're bickering at each other when the issue at hand is that we're in a system that forces us into a rat race. And again, this is not something that they fully understand. There's this is not something that you can just work yourselves out of, okay? I'm about to get into this position, $17, and I think they're gonna, once the training is done, they're gonna put it to $19. That's still paycheck to paycheck, bro. That's still paycheck to paycheck. And then I'm supposed to pay for everything. I'm okay, I'm getting ahead of myself because this is about Ukraine, but I'm just talking things are not good here in the US. And then I'm supposed to go off and die for this country. What? For this patch of land that could have just been easily ceded off and then we could have avoided a fucking genocide? Come on, man. Holy shit. It's nuclear holocaust and these people still want to go. They still want to play chicken. And Russia is saying, I will use nukes. He is saying it. He's saying, I will use nukes. Don't do it. And it's just crazy. Yeah, man. Right. So just reading again further about the nuclear threat. So Ukraine said that the referendums were carried out under the barrel of a gun and called on its international allies to immediately ramp up severe sanctions on Russia in order to deter it from annexing more territory, as it did with Crimea in 2014. Kiev said it will not stop fighting until it's reclaimed every last inch of land lost to Russia, and said it will not negotiate with the Kremlin following the so-called votes. Moscow, for its part, has warned it has the right to use nuclear weapons to defend its territories and citizens if it feels there is an existential threat, or even if it's attacked by conventional weapons. This has raised concerns that it would resort to using nuclear weapons against Ukraine now that more regions are annexed and Moscow can claim them, however falsely, as their own. One Ukrainian defense ministry official told CNBC this week that Kiev understands the threat of such an attack is real. Speaking ahead of Putin's declaration that Russia has 4 new regions, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that the so-called referendums have no legal value and deserves to be condemned. Quote, "It stands against everything the international community is meant to stand for," Guterres said Thursday. Quote, "It flouts the purpose It flouts the purposes and principles of the United Nations. It is a dangerous escalation. It has no place in the modern world. It must not be accepted. So, yeah, this is just what's happening. And, Kiev is just, they're being very hard-headed and stubborn, because this is like a source of national pride for them to reclaim the lands that have been taken. And they don't want to negotiate. They just want the war to continue, it seems. And it's so crazy, because like the United States, it's not even like Kiev can has any authority to decide, because like if the United States wanted this to be done with, they would just tell Ukraine, make a deal or you're not going to get any of this assistance. Like the US can just force their hand, and then like Kiev has no choice but to listen, because like Kiev is a client. They're not like, because Kiev, once they did this referendum, Russia, and did the annexation, they applied for NATO membership and they got denied. And like Ukraine is never gonna get into NATO, because they just want that third party proxy state that they can just pump money and weapons into, and that's it. And they can just make a whole bunch of money, but they don't care about Ukraine. They don't fucking care. This is all a sham. People only I drive around and I see people with Ukrainian flags now, and now whenever I see that shit, I'm like, I can only assume that like you're like a right wing, like massive what's it called? I can only assume bad things whenever I see Ukrainian flags now, because like they're only doing that now because the media covers it, but they don't seem to care about anything else. They don't pay attention to anything else. So yeah, people are concerned about Ukraine only because the media has reported on it. Meanwhile, like beforehand, like nobody knew what was happening. Nobody knew what was happening in Ukraine until this war started, and until the media told them, oh, well, we have to support Ukraine and you have to hate Russia. That's it. And this is not me saying that I'm pro-Russia. I'm just being realistic, because Russia has a lot of problems. Okay, Putin's not a good person. Like, he's not. But, dude, like, anybody in his position would do the same. If they were seeing all this, like, Western intervention and meddling in the region. I mean, there was a whole, like, insurrection against Yanukovych in 2014. I mean, Yanukovych still wasn't the best person, wasn't the best president, very corrupt, but this Euromaidan revolution, was right-wing and was adjacent with neo-Nazis. I mean, like, we keep seeing image after image of Ukrainians giving Nazi salutes, and like just the other day on Twitter, like the highest commanding officer had this bracelet with all these different like white nationalist symbols. And of course, everybody wants to say like, oh no, but it sees the culture. And it's like, okay, right. Okay, sure. It's just crazy. But yeah, so I'm just like looking at this interactive map just to see the current situation. And I mean, there hasn't been too much. They've been talking about in the Kherson region in the south, there have been some gains there. Also, in the Kharkiv Oblast, there's still a lot of liberation. The Ukrainians taking back territory. So it's still very much a stalemate at the moment, and we're just going to have to see what happens. But I'm looking at Zaporizhzhia, or the Oblast, and about half of it is under control, and they're not too far off from the city of Zaporizhzhia, which again is like a major hub. Like, it's like one of the biggest cities, and it's certainly a choke point for them to cross the Dnieper. So yeah, and there's also the nuclear power plant. So there's a lot on the line. And again, at the moment there hasn't been too much happening, but yeah, dude, it's we're gonna have to see as the winter rolls around what happens, because the winter is coming, and that's going to freeze up the roads and or the soil, right, which allows the tanks to roll. So yeah, man, it's going to be crazy. And like I was watching this video of this Ukrainian soldier. He was basically, he found like a wounded Russian soldier that like his comrades like just couldn't take care of, and they left him. And the Ukrainian soldier himself, he looked very skinny. Like there's a point where, you know, a person is like malnourished, where like you see like the curvature of their skull, right? You see the cheekbones and everything, and like that's what this Ukrainian soldier looked like. Like he looked very, very malnourished. So I'm just very curious about what the situation on the ground is for those troops. There's been a lot of talks about like some troops refusing orders. They're saying like, oh, our commissars are leaving us to die. We're cannon fodder. So like this is what happens in these international like imperialist conflicts. Like it's the working class, the working soldiers on the ground being forced by their government to fight and die, and they're just, and they don't want to be there. They want to go home. They want to, like, that's the thing with like wars in the past, because nobody wants to leave their home and like get killed over what, a piece of land or national. So it's like they have to whip them up with like religion, or they have to whip them up with nationalism. Oh, this is for glory and honor, and they have to do so much programming to get regular people to pick up weapons and go off and kill people who otherwise would have, like, if there was no conflict whatsoever, they would have gotten along just fine. But now they're, you know, going to go off and kill each other. But yeah, so that's Ukraine. That's the Russia situation. Also, threat of nuclear conflict. Great times we're living in. Like, this is honestly worse than the Cuban Missile Crisis, because there's a proper conventional war happening that we are like too involved in. We're way too invested in. And again, we drop billions of dollars. So I don't want to hear anybody saying, when it comes to issues like healthcare and education and the infrastructure, I don't want to hear anything about the costs, okay? Because when the United States wants to do something, when the United States wants to get something done, we do it. So, like, again, the United States is supposed to be right. Anything is possible, right? Nothing is impossible. But hey, like, we just can't provide healthcare. We can't provide a functioning education system, because we need war. Okay, that's what we need. We just need more war, more guns, more bombs, and more tanks, because, you know, that's what we need. Yeah, man. It's not even now, like, the conversation now around all these different social services is not even about the costs anymore. Now it's just like, oh, well, you're just a freeloader. You just want something for free and this and that. You're just entitled, right? You're entitled because you want to live a comfortable life, and because you're a law-abiding citizen, and you just don't want to drown in debt, right? It's just, anyway, that's just what we're dealing with. And yeah, I mean, again, you can only, you talk so much about certain issues, and like people they just don't want to hear it. Again, the American people are just so disconnected. They're so disconnected. And I know I sound spiteful, and in a lot of ways I am, because this is so sad. It's disappointing. Like, we're just like sleepwalking. It's just crazy. like I remember making a comment on Twitter, and somebody was like, "Oh, you're just resentful towards our civilization because you got some daddy issues." And I'm like, you know what? I do got some issues, daddy issues. But it's just so interesting that whenever like a person has issues due to the actions of their parents, it's the child's fault and not the parent that caused all the damage and harm. Like that's just the attitude that people have. It's just whoever is the weaker, the weakling, right? Whoever has the least amount of power, that's the person that you gotta yell at. That's the person you have to vilify and disrespect, because It's just easier because, hey, like we keep doing reports, right, of like, oh, like there's a bullying epidemic. What? I wonder why there's a bullying epidemic. Oh man, that could. Anyway, I just went off on another tangent. I was talking about U.S. because the U.S. is not a good place. This is not this is just not a good place to be in. There's some good spots. I mean, there's a lot to love and like, but our values and culture is just it's just so bad. It is not in the right place. But yeah. So before I wrap up with the international segment, I want to talk about a smaller incident that occurred, and this is between Haiti and the Dominican Republic. So in Haiti, they have been having protests and they've been having unrest, and so the situation is still very much like in motion. But it's these protests are against the current president Ariel Henry, who is supposed to hold elections, but he's lagging behind on that. So the government is just not really functioning, and it's also like U.S. backed. I mean, this is what the current government in the United States and its involvement. It's what leads me to believe that the United States sanctioned the assassination of Moise, like last year. Again, people forgot about that. The Haitian president got killed. And it's just crazy. Like the whole country is just falling apart. And people are protesting. And they got gas issues, food issues. And yeah, it's things are escalating. And so what had occurred last week was, or just 2 weeks ago at least, was that there was some protests on the border area. And so there is it's sort of like an international zone. And so what happens is that it's called Code de Vie. And so what this facility is that Haitians can cross over into the Dominican Republic or Haiti or whatever. It's like it's like a neutral zone. And so Haitians come here, they do their business, and then they go back and cross over into Haiti. So it's a marketplace. And so there was some protests and there were some mobs and groups in that area. They were causing some damage, and the Dominican military had to go in to settle and restore order. So I haven't really read reports about any injuries or deaths, but it was still like a pretty significant moment because this is something I've talked about in the past where I've been worried about possible border clashes as Haiti starts to become more and more as the country basically collapses, right? It's the country's controlled by gangs and militias, and it's going to fall apart. It's going to keep falling apart, and that's going to cause issues in the Dominican Republic because they're going to have refugees crossing over. And already in Dominican Republic, people they do not like Haitians. It's so funny whenever you talk about Haitian racism in Dominican Republic because people get very upset at it. Dominicans get upset at it, but it's real. Like, it's real. And yeah, man, this is just something that I'm worried about because I feel like if tensions escalate and if Dominican Republic has to send an intervention, either the Dominican Republic or the United States and the UN, because they've invaded Haiti so many different times in the last 20 years, that could cause like some racial tensions, or I should say ethnic tensions, because we're practically the same people. Yeah, man, it's just like it's crazy. And again, they talk about, oh no, I'm not racist, but they shouldn't come here because we're in our country and they're in their country, and you should just keep us separate. Like, that's the attitude. It's really disappointing. So, yeah, and I'm just reading from Dominican Today. So they're just talking about this unrest that happened. So just reading. So the Dajabon border market is being held this Friday in calm and under close military supervision, including tanks and dozens of heavily armed soldiers, after the incident that occurred yesterday in the Codiv Free Zone in Juana Menendez on the Haitian side. So what had occurred is that the Dominican military effectively invaded Haiti to restore order in this neutral zone. So, yeah, man, this is going to become a thing now where you're going to hear stories of a border clash and the Dominican troops moving in to deal with the threat. So, Haitians residing in towns near the border with Dajabon are crossing, buying their food, and returning to their country. Although there are fewer buyers than on other occasions in Cape Haïtien, residents fear the roads will be closed on their return route when crossing into Dominican territory. Juana Mendez's Haitians say that the situation is calm in their town. Tanks circulate the periphery of the market. Coronel Rosario Perez commands the members of the Dominican Army. Commander Rosario Perez said everything is calm on the Dominican side and that vigilance is reinforced to avoid any situation. So, yeah, it was just a small little incident that occurred, but this is going to be a running thread now. Like, this is, especially as the situation in Haiti gets worse in terms of unrest and in terms of the protests that's happening. Yeah, man. I mean, it's going to be like, because the Dominican military, it's really only good for like a domestic like occupation, just to keep stuff in order. I mean, I've been so many times into DR where like we'll be at a toll station and they'll just be like soldiers and they're so bored. like they're holding their M16 and they'll be on their phone, like, sliding into some girl's DM or some shit. Like, it's just like, so they have professional soldiers, but for the most part, like, it's just like a job, a steady job, right? Join the military, just stand around with a gun. So, again, I love my country, but dude, like, come on, it's so funny. But yeah, I don't really see them having the capabilities to like actually like properly invade or I should say intervene, because invasion's it's a little touchy word, but intervene into Haiti, because like the Haitians got some heavy stuff in terms of like weapons and stuff. I mean, again, it's like, again, as I said, it's gangs and militias, but still, like, a guerrilla insurgency is not something that this army is equipped for. So there's probably going to be some weapons deals with the United States. And again, the United States is going to be like, hey, you want some Humvees? You want some of these F-16s we got laying around? Like, that's what's going to happen. So we're going to have to keep an eye on it. But yeah, this is something that's going to continue. And just Haiti in general, like, it's just going to be a tight spot, in the Caribbean. It's going to contribute to migrations and piracy, as we said here, right? Militias and gangs crossing over into DR, and then in DR, like, there could be, like, I don't want to, like, because I don't want to assume the worst out of my people, but, like, I've been around in the streets, and, like, I could totally imagine some sort of pogrom. Like, not even, like last week was the anniversary of this massacre, the Parsley Massacre, and yeah, man, like, that's not really something that, like, we talk about as Dominicans. It's like one of the darkest moments in our history, and it's kind of just like brushed under the rug. Again, I don't know if they talk about it in the public school system, so I'll have to ask my cousins, but it's like, yeah, man, like, any mention of like our crimes as a nation, it's just like, oh, well, you just hate your people. It's just like, that's the attitude And it's like, how do I say this? Trujillo at the time, who orchestrated that massacre, he's universally hated. Okay, so it's not like there are nationalists today who like celebrate Trujillo, but what they do is they'll talk and say that Trujillo was bad, but they'll say stuff like, well, you see though, because he had Dominican interests at heart and he wanted to make DR a strong nation, and then they'll also talk about the Haitian people and just say like, oh, well, they come here and they're violent and they don't like to work, or they're lazy, which is so ironic because the Haitian, undocumented migrants are the ones in the sugarcane fields cutting and doing all this crap. And, so yeah, man, it's just, this sort of situation could escalate and it could get nasty because there's a lot of animosity, right? Because, oh no, you see, because Haiti occupied us and they invaded us 200 years ago, so we just have to hate them. And it's like, bro, like, get over it. It's 200 years ago. Holy shit. You think they can you think they can invade us now? Like, come on, man. Like, it's so ridiculous, but that's the attitude. And of course, whenever you're critical of the culture, trying to like, hey, we should fix certain things about our culture, oh no, you just hate your people. You're just, yeah, that's just the attitude. But it's a battle that's not really worth it. Like, it's just like, okay, whatever, like, it's not up to these people who want to gatekeep and pretend like, oh, well, see, because you're not a real Dominican because this and that, and there you go. It's like, it's not up to you. I was born this way. It's in my blood. Okay. I listen to Palo music, Atabales music on my free time. Like, and if you don't know what that is, look up Atabales Dominicana. Like, that's culture right there. Okay. That is culture. So yeah, man, it's interesting situation, and these are conversations that I'm going to start hearing if the situation in Haiti gets worse and if our military gets more involved. Like, this is just some stuff that I'm gonna have to listen to now, because oh no, el país, oh no, la patria, like, yeah, it's just, yeah, it's crazy. So right, so we are, wrapping up with, because I opened this show talking about the natural event systems that have occurred with Hurricane Ian and Fiona. So that was a big portion of the introduction. But I wanted to talk about some other weather news and just different forecasts in terms of like winter, right? I live in Texas, and we got hit hard with the winter storm not too long ago. So it's like our winters, it's cold. We get cold, but it's usually like a storm event or like an extreme weather event that will bring in snow or freeze. And so it's just something that we gotta think about, because it could be a hit or miss. So either this winter is just going to be normal and it will be cold and we'll just be hanging out and chilling with our hot cocoa, but we could also get a very severe polar vortex, right? That's what it's called, and get a cold snap. And yeah, man, like, still, man, like, it's still very fresh on people's minds what happened. And our grid system has not been repaired. It is not ready. We're not ready for this. So I'm going to have to get my preps in order. Like, I have some propane burners. I got to get my water in order. I also got to get non-perishable foods. That's another prep I got to get done. So yeah, man, it's this weather that we're paying attention to, the winter season, possible snowstorms. It's just something that we gotta pay attention to. And I'm reading from this like weather forecast, long range weather forecast. They're talking about La Nina. We're in the third year La Nina, which usually contributes to cold weather systems. So, we could see some freeze and some stuff. I mean, like, it's already starting to cool down already. Like, it's, this morning was, let me see actually. Because the mornings now are starting to get into like the 50s and 60s, which is nice. I'm glad it's starting to cool down. Yeah, oh man. Next week, it's going to get into the 70s and, in the mornings, 40, 46, 48. Wow. Man, that's interesting. So yeah. It's going to get cold. Starting to cool down pretty early, actually. So I'm going to have to get ready for that. But yeah, man. I'm just thinking about all my friends and like they don't have this in the back of their mind. They're just like, yeah, again, like they nobody learned. And if I step in and just say like, hey, you should get some preps ready. Oh, well, I don't know why you always assume the worst, Gabriel. And then like we get a disaster, which I said was going to happen. And yeah, again, it's just like at this point, I'm just doing my stuff, and I'm just gonna help whoever I can. But at the same time, it's like there's only so much that I can do. I can't help everybody, and yeah, man. Especially like most of my family's in Houston, but like I've said consistently, and I've said, I mean, again, like you make suggestions, and they're like, oh, well, I don't know, but. And it's hard. Yeah, you definitely can't just like pick up everything and go. But again, it's just like, this is not the place to stay. We have to leave. But they don't want to. So, and that's the thing that I keep like getting hung up on. It's like, I want to leave. I want to get out of Texas. But my family is stuck here. So even if I move, I'd say Colorado or Michigan, I don't know where I would go. But if I move out of state, I would still have to come to this place because my family's here and they don't want to move. And it's just like, it's just crazy. And Houston it's, again, like Houston sucks. Okay, I've made every excuse I can not to go to Houston. It's so bad. It's so bad. Man. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. But I'm talking about this winter and just paying attention. Again, like they just said, like it's going to get like 46, 48 degrees next week. That's cold. I mean, I'm glad because like this summer was hot. It's like, okay, it's hot. Let's cool down. And now it's going to get very cold pretty soon. So that probably means that the winter is going to get very cool. So yeah, dude, it's just something to pay attention to. And I was just like, paying attention to these forecasts, and yeah, again, like, because I live in East Texas. I mean, I'm in Huntsville, so it's like North Houston, East Texas, and they showed the forecasts and possible snow depth, and again, is based on like past winter events, so it's not as though they're gonna predict too much snow. But at the same time, we could still get a polar vortex, and that can bring snow. So, yeah. And so, that's what we have to prepare for. I probably won't get too bad until like January or February. So that gives me some time to prep. But yeah, that is something to keep an eye on. So, that's what's happening for us with the winter forecasts. And before I wrap up with the show, I just want to talk at least about some flooding disasters that have been occurring. So I was talking about not too long ago the Pakistan floods, which are still really bad. Like the region's just devastated. Like it's going to take some time to recover. But now we also got floods in Nigeria, and they're showing as of today at least 80 dead. So yeah, some really bad flooding, and again, like, all these natural disasters are hitting in global south areas that contribute practically no carbon emissions. And they're getting decimated. And yeah, it's just like, but then when it happens to a place like Florida, where they get hit by natural disaster, these resort villas, these retirement villas, it's a tragedy. I mean, it is a tragedy, but it's just like all the attention is there, and then you see news about other parts of the world where people are poor, having to live through this, who haven't contributed to this climate emissions, and then things are going to get so bad that they have to move, and then they're going to get called climate refugees, or they're going to be called undocumented, or they're going to bring crime, or it's just like things are not going to go well. Okay, 2050 is going to be a really, really bad year. Like the next couple of decades, it's going to get rough. So I'm reading from CNN, and so they're just talking about this flood system that has happened. So they say 67 or 76 people have died as their boat capsized while they tried to flee dangerously high flood waters that have inundated swaths of southern Nigeria. The boat, carrying more than 80 people, capsized in the southeastern state of Anambra on Friday as people desperately tried to escape floods that had risen as high as rooftops. Recent flooding in the area has displaced up to 600,000 people, according to the country's National Emergency Management Agency, or NEMA. Nigeria's flood crisis has been disastrous this year, killing at least 300 people and affecting more than 500,000 people. Okay, so the 80 I was talking about was from a boat attempted escape. So at least 300 people have been killed overall. Yeah, infecting more than 500,000 people. NEMA said last month. NEMA warned a more catastrophic flooding for states located on the courses of the river Niger and Benue, explaining that 3 of Nigeria's overfilled reservoirs were expected to overflow. The Anambra tragedy follows the devastating aftermath of a flood that swept through swaths of neighboring north-central Kogi state a week ago, leaving buildings submerged underwater that rose to levels not seen in a decade, according to officials of the Kogi Red Cross Society. At least 6 people, including a toddler, were reported to have died in Kogi's worst-hit Ibaji district, which the state governor Yahaya Bello said was 100% underwater. Okay, sorry about that. My apartment, they did their inspection. Like, they were supposed to come yesterday, but now they came like in the middle of my recording. So, which is good because I boarded up my cat. I put her in the boarding clinic to avoid them finding her. So I'm gonna have to wrap up and get her. But yeah, so that's just what's been happening with this global South tragedy, with Nigeria getting this flooding, and yeah, again, this is just what's happening. People are just losing their homes and turning into refugees, and they got to flee their homes, and that's just the trend that's happening. But that is today's episode. And man, yeah, that inspection threw me off. They knocked on the door very hard, but I'm gonna wrap up so I can get my cat now. But yeah, I do appreciate y'all listening and coming to my show. And as I said, I want to address last episode because I was kind of like getting a bit personal, which I don't mind. People tell me not to get too personal. Of course, there are some information I gotta keep on the down low, but I like being honest. I want to be honest about my situation. I would prefer to be honest than hold information out. And I know it sounds like it's just I don't really have anybody to talk to, and I do go to counseling, but still, it's just like you're just expected to like never talk about things that are going on in your life, even as you're trying. I'm doing my best. Like, this is truly the best that I can do. And I haven't committed any crimes. When I'm not constantly struggling for work, I do well with school. It's just like just a break. And that's why I'm despite all the money that I spent, I'm glad I went to New Orleans because I really needed a vacation. I really did. It was a good time, good experience, and now I'm back in the shit. I'm just yeah, eking by, and it's just the way it is. It's just how my life is. But hey, that's just the way it is. So I'm gonna wrap up here. I'm gonna get my cat, and yeah, we're just gonna continue living. Just do what we can. But I appreciate y'all listening. Tuning in and hearing me out with just world events and also events in my own life, and it's just something that I'm working through. It's just, again, like, it's just, yeah, it's just what I'm dealing with. I'm doing what I can. This job is going well. There's still a lot of information to learn, so I'm still in a probationary period, but I just gotta work and I gotta do it, and I gotta get my degree, and I gotta get this program somewhere that is actually functional. So it's just a lot. It's a lot on my plate. But hey, I'm up to the challenge. I'm ready to do it. I wanted to release more video essays, and that's going to require a little bit of research. So hopefully before the end of the month, I can release another essay. It just depends, because I got midterms this week. I had a colonial Latin America history midterm, and so I checked it the day before, because all these online exams that I've been taking were just multiple choice, whatever. So I thought, okay, well, it's going to be the same thing here. Nope. It turned out it was all essay, short answer, paragraph answers that I had to make. So I was very lucky that I checked the day before the due date, so I was able to, because it's early Latin American, we're talking about Mesoamerican civilization, so I was able to get that done. But dude, I was just bro, what the fuck? Why did you? That's the thing. These professors, they try to catch you. So anyway, so yeah, I am kind of wrapping this up abruptly, because I need to get my cat, and then I do clock in actually less than an hour for my job. So I'm gonna wrap up here. But thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening. I love you all. I really mean that. So thank you so much, and hang in there. We just gotta keep our eye open, right? Who knows what could happen? These folks in Florida, they thought they were living fine, and then they just got washed out. So that's just life. Just keep your head on the swivel. So thank you for tuning in, and have a good one. Thank you.